Welcome to Executive Insights for Life Sciences Innovators, and thanks for joining us. On this podcast, we'll explore leadership, innovation, and growth in the life sciences sector. I'm Don Alexander, founder of GeneCoda, a boutique executive search firm dedicated to connecting visionary leaders with life sciences companies shaping the future of therapeutics and scientific tools. On each episode, we'll dive into candid conversations with industry pioneers, uncovering strategies, insights, and real world experiences that drive success in our industry. If you're interested in presenting as a guest of a future episode, please scan the barcode image at the top of my video frame and follow the instructions. Now I'm pleased to be joined by Murat Croci, the co-CEO of Ibex Biosciences. Welcome, Murat.
Thank you, Don. It's wonderful to have me. Thank you.
Absolutely. So Murat is the co-CEO of Ibex Biosciences, where he helps lead the development of breakthrough therapies targeting unmet major medical needs in both oncology and infectious disease. With more than 2 decades of experience across biotechnology, operations, and company leadership, Murat brings a disciplined execution focused approach to translating high conviction science into clinical stage programs. As a founder and investor in IBEX, he combines scientific ambition with capital discipline, focusing on building durable assets designed to move efficiently from preclinical success toward real world patient impact. And when not running IBEX Bioscience, Murad enjoys taking his kids wall climbing and playing chess online. So, again, we're happy to have you, Murat. Let's dive first and foremost into your career journey and your leadership perspective. What originally drew you into the life sciences industry at large and ultimately into leadership roles within biotech?
Well, thank you, Don. I'll say that it was not because I chose biology early in college, kind of fell into it. I was an accountant with an accounting background, but I noticed that states were subsidizing biology very, very heavily, particularly the state of Maryland. And they had a program where investors would put in X amount and the state would refund a portion of the investment. So as an accountant, I looked to other biosciences companies that could benefit from this program. And I learned the program by helping one such company. That was before I started. And it got me very interested in biology and the process and the business behind it. So that's how I got my foot in the door. And I guess to make a long story short, I eventually started my own company with that knowledge in hand. And that allowed me to hire a lot of relevant people.
That's great, Murat. Looking back, reflecting back over your own career, which experiences most influenced, I suppose, how you lead today?
Well, I would say that um, understanding what steps are needed to advance an objective, like that's key to being a good leader, to just have that foresight and like knowing exactly what steps are required, because then you can anticipate problems. You can make adjustments early on without falling a victim to, let's say, a runway that required more capital than what you did, or going down a path that was onerous or didn't get your answer as quickly. So trying to like kind of work backwards and understand what's required in developing drug before you make these steps, they may lead to a dead end.
Absolutely. I think someone famous once said, begin with the end in mind. Um, how does, now you've taken, I know, some personal capital risk in IBEX, as have other co-founders, I believe. How does taking personal capital risk alongside investors shape the way you make strategic and operational decisions?
Well, first of all, you feel a lot more pain when you make these decisions because it's your money that's being depleted. So, and there's more risk capital. It's better to find others to put the money in and then take the risk. But absent of that, you're able to put your own money and take the risk, then, well, you're a brave person, but someone has to do it, or the business doesn't move forward. I mean, I would treat my capital as closely as an individual other person's capital. I mean, they're all in one pile, so I would be just as cautious. If you had more capital, you can do more, but with limited capital, particularly for early stage startups, you really want to focus on getting the core work done. And I've seen this. I've seen companies, because I'm from an accounting background, where someone gets an extraordinary amount of capital. I'm talking about $100 million, and they buy teams. They hire teams of attorneys and staff members and fancy offices and furniture. I mean, it's totally absurd. Like the key is to take 1 or 2 million and move the programs along and keep the rest in capital on the side, or they probably raise too much money if they're asking for, if they raised 100M. So it's just exhibiting prudent, disciplined allocation of capital.
100%. Yeah, no, that we keep hearing that theme quite a bit. So that makes a lot of sense. So let's turn then to IBEX Biosciences, and maybe you can give us a brief overview of what the company is working on.
Great. So we have two labs. One is focused on gene therapy, DNA. Other one on proteins, antibodies. The protein division is located in Cumberland, Maryland. And again, we have two labs because we went out in Western Maryland to get a huge subsidy, and we maintained that lab there. And then the gene therapy is in North Bethesda. So with the protein side, we're focusing on monoclonal antibodies that target unmet medical needs, and primarily in oncology, cancer. And we have a malaria program. I can get into that. And with the gene therapy right now, we're focusing on high-grade glioblastoma or brain cancer. So I can get into each of these programs, but that's how the division of labor is between the two labs. And we have about a dozen people working for the company, 10 scientists full-time, and 2 or 3 personnel who are doing all the administrative work. So you can see how lean we are in that respect.
100%. Yeah, please feel free to expand on the programs a bit if you would for our audience.
Yeah,
That'd be great.
absolutely. I'll start out with the monoclonal antibody.
Mhm.
So one of the drugs we have is a drug that targets Plasmodium falciparum, which is malaria in the blood stage, and essentially we go after it in a very unique way. Instead of targeting the parasite directly, we found that if you just block the receptors on the red blood cell, the parasite die within seconds, and the infection is eliminated. It's an effective cure. We tested this in third-party labs in Spain that does most of the malaria testing for products, whether MMV or Gates Foundation or whomever. And essentially, in both tests, the report read that it was an actual one-shot cure, and there was no noted toxicity. So that would be our malaria program. And the same target can also be used for cancer, but that's different. That has a antibody drug conjugate. So they put a chemo agent on the antibody, and the antibody binds to the cell surface receptor of 147, which is highly upregulated in many cancers, notably colorectal cancers. And the antibody readily endocytoses, meaning once it binds to the cell, it enters in the cell and delivers its payload. And then enzymes clip the payload, and then the tumor dies. So the second drug is an ADC, antibody drug conjugating, is colorectal cancer. And there we eliminated a solid tumor with 1 intravenous dose in animal models and repeated animal models. So those are our 2 monoclonal antibody drugs that we have validated in duplicate in animal models by third parties. Those are the ones that we want to advance into human clinical trials phase 1. And those are programs that are out in Cumberland. As far as gene therapy is concerned, we have one coming up to go into a murine model, a synergic model of a glioblastoma. And that is a direct tumoral injection where it expressed certain genes, one modified. And in cells, at least, it destroys about 96% of the glioblastoma cells. But we'll see what happens in mice. It usually does better in the animal than it does on the petri dish. So we're very excited about that program. That's out of our North Bethesda office. And then we have other and we have other programs also that are a little earlier, not too far behind, but right behind this. One for blood cancer. We have other programs. So we have active laboratories where we make drugs. Not all of them work in animals. That's called translation.
Mhm.
But those that do translate, we have the opportunity to even advance even further to do a pre-IND enabling study, and then ultimately into a human patient in a clinical trial.
That's fantastic. That's a really nice sounding portfolio, quite frankly. I mean, from your perspective, just following on, from your perspective, what most often prevents promising preclinical programs, rather, from successfully translating into the clinic?
That's a great question. Like everyone is case specific. Now, if you take the malaria program, novelty, because you are doing an approach that isn't known in the malaria community, because everyone attacks the parasite. No one has blocked its doorway, and then the doses are small, and they just it's and as far as the CD147 for cancer, that drug is not novel so much so that it's been done in China and it's very successful. In primate studies, it eliminates liver cancer. It was published a few months ago. But in US or in the EU, this target is not known, so it's considered novel. So a lot of the large pharmaceutical companies, they're in it to make money. They want to make money as much as they can. And they want you to de-risk. They want the smaller biotech companies to de-risk the asset for them. They don't want any risk if they can help it. Of course, they're going to have some risk. But the more that you can do, the better it is for them, because they're going to spend less money and make more money at the end. So it is the case that if you make something a little too novel, a little bit too unique, you have a trouble attracting large pharma, because they're going to say, this is wonderful data, continue to de-risk the asset. So that's often the case why promising drugs may not advance, because the large pharmaceutical companies see that you can do more on it so that their risk becomes much less. So that's the main reason I see, at least from our perspective.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. And then, like, how do you or your team really evaluate whether a program is truly ready to advance beyond, headline data, I suppose?
That's right. So look, people use other grant systems. They use venture capitalists. They use family offices. So they solicit these groups of people, and they make an offering to do. And of course, we have a budget where you require to make the drug under CGMP, and you have to engage in a clinical trial. So there's a round of funding that takes place. And that round of funding allows us to go into a phase 1 clinical study. With the success of a clinical study, then the options open up. What are those options? Well, that is going back to large pharma and saying, look, we de-risked this asset, buy us out. Or the alternative would be, you can simply list on a public exchange and let the market decide what your value is worth. Maybe that would be a large return. Or third option would be go back to an institution, get revalued, and stay private a little longer, so that you can continue to grow your portfolio. And then obviously there's an exit. Those other two options come into play. So it becomes a finance game. Can you raise the funds to go ahead and get that phase 1 done?
Absolutely. Yep. And let's talk a little bit further, if we can, about scaling and capital strategy. What have been the most, I guess, challenging execution decisions as IBEX has progressed its programs?
Um, so I would have to say is trying to determine what the FDA wants. Because there's been a lot of guidelines in terms of preclinical, whether or not, let's say, to use primates, to use animals, whatever would be required to satisfy their concerns of safety. And so I would say that perhaps the most challenging is, the interact that we're going to have with them and just making sure we satisfy their concerns. Now, those concerns have become a lot less since last year and the subsequent administration. They don't want to rely on, examples like primates and so on. So it makes it a lot easier. Sometimes they want organoids and other data that isn't as expensive to generate in order to demonstrate safety. So right now, I would say the challenge that we have is simply just to understand what we need to satisfy the government's interest in safety to advance this forward.
Absolutely. No, that's really actually very helpful. When you think about the portfolio that you described earlier, how do you think about the portfolio focus versus optionality when, at the end of the day, capital and time are finite, finite
Yeah.
sources. So yeah,
Well, luckily we have capital to move the programs forward. There's touch points with investors. We're working with FDA consultants, private equity firms, family offices, venture philanthropy. They all have certain things that they would like to see, and so you have to move forward and let them know because you're going to need a lot of capital at some point, and we're coming up to that point, and that is the phase one study. So um, aside the alternative to beg large pharma or mid-sized pharma and to get a licensing deal for your assets. And that would be a different path. You would go to Bio, you would go to JP Morgan. But the company that will want the highest, I mean, as a company, we would want the highest return for our investors. We wouldn't see about raising the capital for the phase one. So that's kind of where we're looking at. And as long as we're progressing the programs, we feel comfortable. But I think this year is going to be a big catalyst for us because we'd be ready to go into the phase one enabling studies.
absolutely. That's a tremendous milestone. You talked a lot about balancing kind of the interests of the regulators themselves,
Yeah.
along with that of the investor groups and the interests of big pharma as well. So all really interesting uh, themes, I suppose, and just having to balance a whole lot. It sounds like so. Um, that's great. What advice would you offer founders preparing to, I guess, transition from preclinical success such as what you've had there at IBEX to early clinical development? Are there any learnings that you might share with the audience, share with others?
We'll just have a very good FDA consultant that
Hmm.
would be able to not have you get stuck in the clinic. There's a lot of nice vendors right above us. The hard part is doing the preclinical work, believe me. Um, but just doing the other work like the FDA work, getting the IND enabling, those vendors, the CDMOs, all those vendors are there. You should speak with them. You should get their, pick their minds. Uh, you have to you have to find the lowest hanging fruit and the easiest way to get your product through the clinic, whatever that may be, whether that's an improvement in design, whether or not it's going after patients, for example, who are late stage, whether that you're trying to do a first line therapy. And then if you do a first line therapy and if it doesn't work, they can revert to standard of care chemo. I mean, these are all certain ideas and concepts that will have a huge impact on how your drug moves forward or if it does move forward. And of course, always speak to large pharma, keep the doors open because you need a backup plan. You just can't assume that everything will go perfectly. It depends on the capital you have and your strategy. Speak to institutional investors, VCs, whomever they may be at the time.
Right.
But it's all about expanding your network and understanding the market dynamics and the regulatory frameworks because these things change so quickly. I mean, everyone, even the market has interests in certain products and they evolve very, very fast.
Absolutely. Yeah. Really good. Let's talk a little bit about the road ahead, if you will, and how is, or maybe I should say, how else is IBEX preparing for the next phase of its development across the various programs?
Well, it's interesting because when we look at it objectively and what the market wants to see, and they really put emphasis on a glioblastoma program, which is showing excellent efficacy. So some foundations and others who I've spoken with said, look, if you do these studies and are successful, the door is open for a tremendous amount of funding. Not as much with colorectal cancer or malaria, but there's still considerable interest. So you may simply have that indication that the market at this stage really is interested in funding. And that happens with GLPs and so on. Like you can just be at the right place at the right time with the mRNAs back then with COVID.
Mhm.
So it's just kind of like I wouldn't say flavor of the month, but I would say there are groups that are very interested in particular modalities and indications that we would want to focus on to get funding as quickly as possible, and that's what we're doing, at least with the glioblastoma at this time, and other indications like so with the cancer. So overall, that's basically what we're trying to do: identify who would be the best candidates for fundraising.
Absolutely. And it almost sounds like, yeah, that could be different, given the indication, as you say, different groups. Well, looking down the road a bit, when you think about success for IBEX Biosciences, what does that look like to you and your team?
Getting funded so we can move forward to a phase 1 study. And so our current offering is a $10 million offering. And that would get us at least through phase 1 for malaria and potentially for the colorectal cancer. And perhaps getting a great result in this next in vivo study for glioblastoma or others that were planned. And leverage these studies to gain additional capital. I mean, we want to hopefully either license to a large pharma or go public within 4 years. That's our objective. And that would be the liquidity event for investors. They would see a return at that point in time, whether they choose to, settle up with doing a private offering or perhaps even a public offering.
Absolutely. That's great. I guess thinking a little bit broader scale then as well, what opportunities generally in the industry are you most excited about, looking forward again over the next few years?
I kind of like the viral vectors. I think the production of AAVs and lentiviruses out there have gotten a lot better. CDMOs, the vendors out there, they've figured out how to make these things work better and infect cells much better. And that's what like when we had a glioblastoma drug, we just needed a vendor that had a great production of AAV because if your capsid doesn't infect the tissues, target tissue, then you don't see the effect of the drug. And I think there's been a huge improvements in that area. Also, antibodies, a lot of antibody drug conjugates have gone off patent. So stuff that small biotech couldn't do a few years ago, we can do pretty readily. There's vendors available that pretty much will sell you any conjugate. It's off patent. You can conjugate yourself or do it by a third party. So it opens the doors to more advanced drug development than it did, I'd say, just maybe even 3 or 4 years earlier.
Absolutely. Great. Really good insights. What just, and you've plowed the road as an entrepreneur yourself, but,
Yeah.
what final advice would you share with founders, executives that are building, early stage therapeutic companies? Is there anything else that you would tell someone else to go and do?
Try not to overextend yourself. Take a look at the capital you have in hand. Take a look at where you could get capital, and just refine what steps are required to get this to a point where you can get another party interested, or you can get another round of funding. And just pay attention. Also, consider the market that you're addressing. And so, there's a lot of analysis that goes into it. And if you're actually going to build out labs like we do and not outsource the stuff, make sure you have a very competent chief scientific officer that has a lot of expertise in early stage biology. I mean, immunologist would be preferable. Someone who has a lot of knowledge, maybe who worked for um, a contract services organization that has a broad range of skills, because you're going to need every bit of it.
Absolutely. Yep. They've been there, done that.
Yeah.
Um, where can listeners, I guess, go and learn more about Ibex Biosciences and the company's work?
The website, it's ibex.bio. Anyone could go to the site and look up our portfolio. There's links to our patents. There's videos on how the two drugs that I addressed earlier in the call work on the malaria and the colorectal cancer. And also LinkedIn, if they can follow Ibex Biosciences on LinkedIn. I post pretty regularly, and anything new comes out, I always let users know how our progress is coming along.
Fantastic, Murat. That's super. Well, thanks again. That wraps up this episode of Executive Insights for Life Sciences Innovators. I appreciate the audience tuning in and hope that everyone found today's conversation valuable. If you enjoyed the discussion, please be sure to leave a review and share it with your network. Please also mark your calendars for February 23rd at 1 o'clock Eastern Time with Ben Scruggs, the CEO of Altus Biosystems. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you soon.